Although we love MCU and all the characters, whether we talk superheroes or the villains, it feels like we have a special place in our hearts for them. But that cannot distract us from what feels missing from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The characters are flat and one-dimensional, and the villains are much worse. Let's discuss this in depth, as this is why Marvel/MCU movies are actually bad.
It's not possible.
Darling, you have no idea what's possible.
What's actually wrong? Fans will scoff at the notion that Marvel's upcoming massive multiplex extravaganza could be anything less than spectacular in every aspect. However, there is plenty of evidence that the Civil War has kind of disappointed us. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, MCU, quality ranging from okay to just okay again. There are some excellent performances. Robert Downey Jr., Chris Hemsworth, and Scarlett Johansson are all entertaining actors who can readily transition from comedy to drama as the film demands. However, the films are a damp, dismal, multi-billion-dollar blight on pop culture as a whole, not to mention the fact that they're more about making sure all the various bits and pieces are in the right place than providing motivations or setting stakes. Lack of cinema art. This isn't a snobby attitude towards art films. Sure, when comparing Joss Whedon's less-than-skilled camera movement to Kurosawa's is entertaining, but even by American big-budget action movie standards, the MCU's rippling sinews are puerile, and its thunderous explosions are a not-so-mighty poof. Take into account the visuals. None of the MCU movies have a distinct or even interesting visual style. The galaxy in Guardians of the Galaxy is quite bland. Xandar's capital could almost be Houston. There's nothing like the filthy robots and desert planets of the original Star Wars, let alone Blade Runner's cluttered and empty future megalopolis. DC's The Dark World appears to be attempting, but failing too, to emulate the Lord of the Rings trilogy. But instead of completely envisioned countries, languages, and cultures, you get glimpses of half-assed CGI landscapes ostensibly representing other realities. Compare and contrast Ultron's design and impact with Terminator's bloated, skin-falling-off metal robotic nightmare, or T2's sleek liquid metal killer. Compare the Avengers' alien invasion to Alien's magnificently tactile, nasty oozing creatures, or even Pacific Rim's ponderous monsters. In their initial Marvel comics, artists Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko developed distinct, vibrant, and beautiful fantasy imagery. In comparison, the MCU appears to be standard. Stunts and fights in MCU. Similarly, the stunts and battle scenes are rote. In Avengers, Black Widow knocking out a slew of enemies while tethered to a chair is nearly Jackie Chan worthy, but that's an outlier. For the most part, MCU combat consists of individuals blasting each other again and over again, with CGI effects taking the place of imagination, choreography, and character. With its fights on oil slicks and inside buses, Jason Statham's The Transporter is more inventive than virtually the entire MCU, and that's without even mentioning the set pieces in flicks like Kill Bill, or The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Die Hard concentrates on improvisatory barefoot mayhem, whereas The Matrix uses computer graphics to create martial arts that appear to shatter the world. The Marvel Cinematic Universe falls somewhere in the middle, with fight scenes that are neither sublime nor grim. Lack of character depth. The main protagonists in one film may fight to capture some magical Jotek or other just to have it reclaimed by the enemy in the next picture, in 10 seconds since the storyline demands it. Of course, this implies that there are no stakes or repercussions. Even death can be reversed, cancelled, or undone. There's usually a MacGuffin involved. It's always introduced in the most uninteresting way possible, via exposition, and it's always a gleaming, glowing object, lest the viewers forget how important it is. It's not so much that these films are aimed at children, as it is that the stories themselves are childish. They're about as complicated as the stories kids make up while playing with action figures at lunchtime in elementary school. Unnecessary politics. Style above substance, shallowness, and childish rejection to complexity are the themes that emerge here. Marvel isn't the only company that writes shallow stories, but they are the world's largest media conglomerate. That is why they must improve, and we must expect much more from them. The issue is that an apolitical perspective does not exist. Apolitics is a political stance in and of itself. That's the thing about politics, it's everywhere. Just like God was before it, there's no way out. So even if you throw a bunch of seemingly unrelated signifiers into a blender and blend them all together, the end result is just a culture where the cake comes out of the oven. The most popular viewpoint, hegemony, whatever you want to call it, texts that refuse to take a stance end up taking a conservative one, reflecting the most widely held beliefs of the moment back to the audience. Our world is ruled by neoliberalism, a more evolved type of liberalism. This is a political theory and morality that believes the individual has legitimate political authority and that the free market is the only proper method of regulation of behavior. This theme can be found across the MCU films and remains unchallenged. The Marvel movies are a fantastic example of why text politics matter and why even the most seemingly benign junk food film can have far-reaching consequences. How can they make their films better? With all that we've discussed today, I think if Marvel movies could lessen or remove these bits from their movies, less focus on the politics and more on how to make their movies more action and CGI improved, not to forget if they make their characters more strong by an actual background, all this would not only help the audience connect more deeply with the characters, but it'll also make the movies altogether better than all other movies and much more interesting as well.